We are here at the Wellington Heritage Museum on Main Street in Wellington, Ontario. This building started life as a meeting house for the Religious Society of Friends, also known as Quakers. It was built in 1885, the last of 6 meeting houses built in the county, and was active until 1967, when it was handed over by the Society of Friends to the village of Wellington to become a museum. Ever since, it has been used as a space where we can tell the history of the Quakers in Prince Edward County, but also talk more generally about the history of the village of Wellington. And in the spirit of this being formerly used as a meeting house, we are still using it today to host all sorts of community events. Quakers first came here to Prince Edward County alongside Loyalists just after the American Revolution. The majority of Quakers were pacifists and had not participated in the war effort. And because of that, many of them were expelled from the new American Republic and found their way north into British-controlled territory. Upon their arrival, they quickly became the dominant religion here in Prince Edward County. Their core pillars included simplicity, integrity, community, equality, and peacefulness. However, over the course of the 19th century, there were a number of divisions that happened within the Quaker Church, and this led to multiple meeting houses having to be built in order to accommodate the various groups. But in the 1820s, there was a schism, and they separated into the Hicksites and the Orthodox Quakers. The Orthodox were also known as conservative Friends. While the Hicksites maintained that there was an inner light within us all, and that should really dictate their religious practice, the conservative Friends were more dependent on scripture. Here at the museum, at any given time, we always feature a number of Quaker artifacts on display in order to speak to that history of the building. Here we have some pieces that belonged to Eliza Varney, a very famous Prince Edward County Quaker. While she lived a little bit too early to worship at this particular meeting house, Eliza and her husband Levi Varney ran the very well-respected West Lake Boarding School, which was the first boarding school of its kind for Quaker students in Upper Canada. The building, which is now a private residence, can still be viewed alongside the Loyalist Parkway between Bloomfield and Picton. The one other item that I wanted to bring your attention to was this incredible family register. It documents the Dorland family, who were a very prominent early Quaker family here in Prince Edward County. And in fact, Arthur Garrett Dorland, who grew up right here on Main Street in Wellington, wrote the definitive history of the Society of Friends in Canada in the 1920s. The village as we know it today started to grow after the Loyalist arrival in the 1780s. It started out as a very small port for lumber, grains, and fish, with the majority of the early buildings being concentrated down by what is now the Wellington Marina. By the 1850s, the village was home to about 500 people and had a good range of shops, including general stores, blacksmith shops, tanneries, and sawmills. But it had also attracted physicians, builders, and coppersmiths, among others. Because of its waterfront and its growth as an agricultural center, Wellington began to grow as a vacation destination. By the 1880s, a number of resorts had been built in the village, including the very popular Wellman House, later known as the Alexandra Hotel, which would burn down in 1917. The late 1800s would also see the most impressive of this village's homes being built by very affluent members of this community, because by that point, over 100 years after the Loyalist arrival in this area, families had enough extra income to build large homes with big verandas from which they could watch the waves. There are lots of things remaining from times past, including these ghosts of the pews that used to reside here in the museum building. In the 1960s, when it became a museum, display cases were placed over these raw areas of wall where pews had formerly been attached. The cases were removed in 2019, revealing these silhouettes below. Before being renamed Wellington, this village was called Smokeville, after a man named Daniel Reynolds, one of the area's earliest settlers of European descent, who had been nicknamed Old Smoke because of the pipe that he used. His house is actually still standing on Main Street right next to Wellington United Church, and is very likely the oldest home in the village, constructed in the early 1790s. During the building's life as a meeting house, the green space behind the museum building served as a bit of an early parking lot for those traveling to services by horse and buggy. Later, it became a green lawn, but in 2017, the Friends of the Wellington Heritage Museum fundraised and installed a new heritage garden. The garden includes many heritage varieties of plants which are native to the area and could very well have been planted in Quaker gardens. The plants that were chosen also do well in Prince Edward County's unique environment, which is an alvar, which is basically a thin layer of soil over limestone bedrock. In the garden space, you'll quickly notice a work of contemporary sculpture by artist Philippe Palafré. Its monolithic appearance is meant to represent the stoic, simple nature of the Quaker church. However, the cracks in the exterior catch the sunlight and are meant to represent God's light, which Quakers believed was present in everyone.